Welcome back to the Danny Show. Today I have a very special guest. His name is George Stromboulopoulos. So George Stromboulopoulos is a Canadian media personality known for his versatile career in broadcasting. He first gained prominence as a music journalist and host on Much Music, a Canadian music television channel where he showcased his passion for music and youth culture. His charismatic persona and engaging interviewing style quickly made him a household name, earning him widespread recognition and earning him numerous awards for his contributions to the field of entertainment journalism. Expanding his horizons beyond music, Stromboulopoulos transitioned into hosting talk shows, including The Hour and George Stromboulopoulos Tonight, where he showcased his ability to conduct in-depth interviews with a diverse range of guests, from celebrities to political figures to many A-listers. Throughout his career, he has continued to captivate audiences with his thought-provoking discussions, commitment to social issues, and unwavering dedication to providing a platform for voices that may otherwise go unheard. George Stroumboulopoulos remains a respected figure in Canadian media, admired for his talent, authenticity, and contributions to the industry. He has also graduated from the radio broadcasting program at Humber College, and now it is with great honor and privilege that I introduce to you all Mr. George Stroumboulopoulos. How are you doing, George?
Very well, sir. How are you today?
Good, good. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm a huge fan of yours.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
No problem. So, I wanted to know what inspired you to pursue a career in broadcasting?
Kind of nothing, if I'm being honest with you. It wasn't really something I thought about doing ever. It's not something that I thought you could do.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get into broadcasting, right? I didn't even know that it existed in college. So I was a big radio fan. I would call into radio stations when I was 10 or 11 years old, talk stations as well, to try to engage. So I was obviously very interested in it. But again, I didn't think there was any way that I could actually do it. And then
Mm-hmm.
one day, just by fluke, I was looking through a course calendar at Humber College because I was looking to get my motorcycle license, and you could take it there on the weekends.
Okay.
This is when I was working at a movie theater in Rexdale, Ontario, just Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw radio broadcasting, and I thought, all right, I guess I'll just do that. Honestly, this is how the whole thing started. So I didn't have, but I'm from an era where, and it's really hard to kind of communicate it to a younger generation
Mm-hmm.
just how great and interesting the radio was in
Mm-hmm.
the late 70s into the 80s. It's not that it wasn't great in other eras, it was, but it was just so great, and there was so much danger and interesting conversation existing on the radio. It was just so bizarre. Predominantly two radio stations in Toronto did this, Q107 and a station called CFNY. So
Mm-hmm.
if you were a Gen X kid in Toronto, holy smokes, you couldn't help but want to be a part of whatever insanity they were presenting to you
Right.
every night. And the music was amazing. So
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of, I think, obviously was baked into my brain when I was very young and long before I even thought about working. But honestly, I had no intention to do. I thought I was going to be a filmmaker or um, I don't know, military, or I was movie theater usher, so I thought maybe I'd just be an assistant manager at a movie theater. Honestly, I had
Right.
no, and I still kind of felt that way. So I don't have, I'm not a have, I mean, I obviously want to create lots of crazy big things, but I wasn't a kid of huge ambition.
Okay.
What I was a kid who was a dreamer. And I just
Mm-hmm.
thought, why not? Like, I don't know, why not? And that's kind of how it all played out.
That's amazing to hear. So now that you've been in broadcasting for a long time now, you've interviewed a wide range of people throughout your career. Is there a particular interview that stands out to you that's memorable?
I interviewed a woman called June Callwood, who's a legendary Toronto social activist. She had made a lot of her contribution to the culture is so enormous.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really, I think, appreciate it. And she was diagnosed with cancer. She was terminal, and she wanted to do one last interview
Right.
before she passed. And so, a handful of days before the end, we sat down in her house and had a conversation, and it was
Mm-hmm.
pretty incredible. So that one obviously
Mm-hmm.
stays with me because we talked. It was real stuff,
Right.
when you kind of strip away the artifice of, oh, I'm famous, or I'm trying to promote a movie, or here's my record, or I'm a politician pushing. When you strip all that away, and it's just two humans being, as Pink Floyd said, or Roger
Mm-hmm.
Waters said, two humans being. That's what it was, two
Right.
humans being,
Right.
and I I really appreciate that. But I've been so lucky over the course of my career to interview so many people that I often have to be reminded of who I spoke with because I don't remember. It's just
Hmm.
been I've been so privileged to be in the heads of so many interesting people over the years. But June Colwood stands out to me. Michael J. Fox stands out to me as a really interesting philosopher. John Waters was as cool as hell. I got to interview, I mean, Maya Angelou in her home while she sang to me. I mean, come on, right?
Hmm.
Being sung to a gospel tune by Dr. Maya Angelou in her home, that's for the ages. So
Great.
it's just so lucky.
Yeah, no, honestly, it is a privilege for me to have you on the show, honestly, as well.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
So I wanted to know, where in this industry did you learn the most skills from? What was that like the first kind of place you got your footing in the door?
Maybe when I was 21,
Hmm.
I was working at a sports radio station in Toronto called The Fan,
Uh-huh.
and it
Right.
was before something called multiple ownership existed, where companies couldn't own more than one, FM or AM station in a market. So
Right.
they were a little bit more not family run, but there was an element of freedom. So I learned on the job for sure there, but where I really learned was on all of my off days when I wasn't working, I went to work anyway and I practiced. So I had the studio. I learned how to edit. I learned how to write for broadcast. I learned how to broadcast. I learned how to make a promo. All the things that I do now for my show,
Hmm.
I learned then.
Right.
And
Right.
I learned how to. I was doing interviews then, but I learned how to do interviews in earnest more after when I went to the Edge and then Much Music and then of course the Hour. But really the first 4 years of my career where I went all in, Danny, all in. You couldn't tear me away from the learning of that place. And I don't know if that's, I was there and so I baked it in and that's why I did it that way, or it's just who I was to begin with. But I like you should see the YouTube show I do now. So I have this daily music show on Apple. I love doing it. We air in 165 countries and it's a big show and I enjoy it. I love it. It's amazing to be able to play music and all that. But when I'm not doing that show, I
Mhm.
am at my home doing the same thing that I did when I worked at the Fan back when I was 20, and I'm rewiring a studio and I'm conducting interviews and editing interviews because I like to make things. I
Right.
like to make things. And
Right.
so all the stuff I learned in those early days, I'm still doing them now.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, I guess same here as well. I guess I like to make things too, like what we're doing right now, right? Just making my own
Mhm.
stuff. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's
You know
amazing.
what you need? Like everybody needs this, and it's really hard to tell people this because people don't understand it, and you don't really understand it until later. I don't know how old
Right.
you are, but
I'm
and
20.
nothing that how old are you?
I'm 21.
21. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 21. So when I started working in at my first radio show when I was in college, I think I was 19 or 20,
Hmm.
and then I was 21 when I was at the Fan. So yeah, about your age now.
Right.
What nobody wants to hear from an older person who's done this before to tell them exactly, it's I get it because if you wanted to hear it all the time, you wouldn't be who you were, right? There has to be an element of individual expression that you have in you, right, Danny?
Exactly.
But one thing that is really true is it's hours. It's mic time. It's
Yeah.
practice, 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 practice. And I'm practicing every day now. And I've done this for 32 years, but I love the craft of it, right? And so once you figure out your relationship with the craft of this, that's when you can build a career that lasts forever. And you're in a really lucky time where you don't ever need a broadcaster to make a living at this,
Hmm.
right? You can do this on YouTube, you can do this on socials. There are no gatekeepers for you. We had to
Exactly.
bust our ass to try to get someone to let us in the building with a key card.
Right.
People are making more money now in 1 year on YouTube than the richest guys I worked with made in a year,
Wow. Okay.
or in a lifetime. So
Yeah.
that's that's how amazing it is right now. For you, there's no industry that you need to be a part of. You are it, and
Right.
but you need a certain mindset to be able to pull it off, right?
Exactly.
Which
For
is
sure.
why I love doing it on YouTube. We built a YouTube channel a bunch of years ago just for fun, and we got
Hmm.
137,000 subscribers just for fun because we love to do things. And
Right.
to me, that's where you're at right now, right? So it's this
Mhm.
this this crucial time of teaching your brain not how to work smart, but how to work in a place where you're always learning. That's really
Exactly.
key.
For sure it is. Like I learned from like when I started 2 years ago to right now, I learned every step of the way, and I'm still
Yeah.
learning. And
Yeah.
you are as well. After 30 years, like you said, you're
Yeah.
still learning every day. It's about like like you said, kind of absolving yourself into like this craft and kind of enjoying it and learning from it for sure.
Yeah. And it's the reason to do it. All the
Exactly.
other stuff that comes with it,
Hmm.
knowing people, people knowing you, maybe a little bit of money, maybe not having to have a job. I used to drive a forklift, maybe, and have so much respect for people who get up in the morning, put on their construction boots, and go drive forklifts because I used to do it, and
Right.
it's really hard work, and I could do it, and I loved doing it, but I like doing this, and so what you want to do is find a place where you can be, if you're privileged enough to be in a situation where you can express for a living,
Mhm.
that's that's the win. All the other stuff that comes with it is nice, and for sure it's important, but it's not the core. The
Right.
core is you like to do it. And most people don't have the stomach to do it over time. Everybody can start stuff and try stuff, but I think if you look at the number of podcasts that don't get to episode 3, that in and of itself is enormous, right? So
Right.
the doing it is the thing you have to love, but you have to teach yourself how to do all that now.
Exactly. Yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, same. Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to know who were your idols growing up?
Aside from my mother and my uncle, aside from like those two people who are
Right.
my biggest idols,
Yep.
in the public space, it's George Carlin was probably my number one. Joe Strummer from The Clash was a big one for me. Neil Young was a big one for me. Um, there was a woman called Poison Ivy who was a punk rock guitarist. Who I was never going to do that for a living, but she had so much attitude, and she was hella talented, but her attitude was crazy, great, great, and I loved how punk rock she was. But really, it's George Carlin, Chuck D, and Joe Strummer were
Mhm.
the three guys that in media per se, there was there were so many great interviewers out there in the world, but I never thought of myself as an interviewer. Honestly, I didn't
Mhm.
become an interviewer until I became an interviewer. I didn't think about interviewing as a thing.
I
I
see.
was just playing music on the radio, and I would
Mhm.
interview a band here and there or a writer here and there. I became an NBA reporter, and so I started interviewing NBA athletes. I loved Keith Oberman, love Keith Oberman,
Mhm.
love Bob Cole, rest in peace.
Rest in
But I
peace.
was never good enough to do what they do. Like those guys are on a whole other level, right? And
Right. Right, right, right.
so I didn't really grow up watching hosts. Maybe Kermit the Frog when I was 5. But honestly, most of my inspirations weren't the technical thing, and it's probably why when you see what my career has become and how I do it, I'm unapologetically me for a living. I don't try to be anything else because I didn't grow up, you know, trying to be a TV person or any of that. It wasn't my thing. So I was very much inspired by people who had things to say, like Carlin or Chuck D or Joe Strummer, people like that. When I got to the fan when I was about 20, there was a DJ, young guy, I think he was only 25, called Jim Richards.
Mhm.
And Jim Richards is probably the biggest radio influence in my life.
Right.
And there was a guy called Bob Mackwitz who had a show on Q107. He was the boss. He was very inspiring to me. So I had a handful of people, but when I got to the fan, like I said, Mackwitz was the boss, and Jim Richards was the overnight guy and the weekend morning guy. And I still to this day think Jim's the greatest to have ever done this in Toronto. The greatest. I've never
Right.
heard anybody who hits me the way Jim does, and he is the greatest. So
Mhm.
but that happened when I was in my 20s, you know.
Right.
But Jim's again not an interviewer. He's a personality. He's a host. He's a thinker,
Mhm.
and he's the best.
Yeah. That's amazing to hear. All those idols. That's amazing.
Yeah,
So,
you know what it is, man. It's like there's this career. Like I suppose whatever whoever you are, whatever it is you're gonna do
mhm.
for a career, you got to the edge of this insanely uh, dangerous river, and the rapids are quick as hell, and then you have to look at how do you get across, and there's all these stones that are slippery that are sticking out from the river, and you got to figure out how to hop to them. And sometimes the hop is your hop, sometimes the hop is inspiration from somebody else, and you just
Mhm.
have to pick the right places to land to get yourself to the other side of the. And then when you get to the other
Exactly.
side of the river, all there is another river, and with more treacherous rapids. So that's kind of how this game goes. And I
Exactly.
think there's no such thing as I made it, and I love that about this business. But I was very lucky, like I said earlier, the media landscape in Toronto in that 70s, 80s, early 90s, the it was so good. It was so elite
Mhm.
that it's is so many people that I went to Humber College with for radio were inspired by those people on the radio.
Right. No,
Yeah.
that's amazing to hear. Um, and I wanted to know, George, you had your own show, George Stromboulopoulos Tonight. That's where, I grew up kind of watching you on CBC. How was that experience for you having your own show?
I was just thinking about this last night that I never really knew that I had my own show. Obviously, I knew,
Right.
but you're so in it
Right.
every day
Mhm.
that, and this is, I did a lot of things right in that show and I did a lot of things wrong on that show. And sometimes you're so present on the daily show that you're not always connected to what it is that you're actually doing. I now
Right.
I was very conscientious about making sure that I got present there and I learned, but you don't really know any of these things until they're done, and which is good, I think. You just have to kind of make the show.
Right.
And I loved doing that show. But if I stayed doing that show, what would the next stage of my career be, right? And to me, it's not a career for business. It's how am I expressing myself for this window of my life? And when I change and grow, and what do I feel? How am I expressing myself for that window of life? And then how am I expressing myself for that window of life? So that show was really important, obviously, for me, and it gave me so much opportunity that I have today, and a connection with somebody like you that I have today, which is I'm grateful for.
Thank
But
you.
when I'm in it, I don't think about it. I don't really
Mhm.
know that I have my own show. I see it, but your brain disconnects. I walk into the building, there's a big picture of me hanging on the wall. You have to pull out your key card. You walk underneath the picture of me into the studio. So like
Right.
yes, you see it, but I don't look at that and give it any value.
Oh, I
I
see.
look at
Okay.
it like it's just this is a step to do the thing I want to do with the people I want to do it with. And I know that sounds like I'm bullshitting you, but I'm not. That's
No, no, I'm
actually that's actually how my brain works. Of course I'm aware of it. I know, oh yeah, I got a show with my name on it. That's cool. I know that. But I but I don't think about that thing because I think that thing's the dangerous thing.
right.
If that thing is the goal, it's temporary.
Right.
Temporary.
Right, right,
And
right.
so I think one of the reasons why I have my career the way I have, and I've been able to do all the things I've been able to do, is because that's not the goal. The
Mhm.
goal is connecting with the most amount of people in the most interesting way in different walks of life. That's the goal.
For sure.
And I feel like I've more than accomplished that in my life, but there's still lots more to do. And
Right.
I really dig
Exactly.
that.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, I think uh, I can speak on that as well. I think you don't want to get too kind of hyped up on your own self, like when you're walking across, let's just say underneath like a picture of yourself. You don't want to say like, oh yeah, I'm that person and be selfish in that respect. No, you just be like, I got there and I get to walk
Yeah.
across my picture and talk to all these amazing people. So that's amazing.
There's it's not the same now. So, but in about 3 years, it'll be this way.
Hmm.
I think what's really important when you are building your career is to understand the history of this game.
For sure.
So I did a lot of reading about who else has done what I do for a living. I've read tons of memoirs, tons of biographies, never mind just autobiographies, and tons of documents of the time because you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. So what you have to do is jack your brain with all kinds of information and historical context so that when you're in a situation, you recognize I'm not the only one who's ever done this. I'm not the only one who's ever felt this. I'm not the only one who's ever had to navigate this. So it's different because the social media, YouTube, even though social media has been around for a minute, most of the books about it it's not because YouTube stars. We're in a new world with Casey Neistat, what he was able to do with Emma Chamberlain, and now what Jimmy's doing, Mr. Beast.
Right.
The level of who they are, like the documents of their time, haven't really been written yet the way it had been written about traditional media. It's possibly because publishers don't see it. It's possibly because the audience who's interested in this kind of thing isn't interested in this kind of stuff. Most of the documents that are out there from all these people are telling you how to do this. So it's very self-helpy, which I think is great.
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure.
to understand the history of where we are, like I just finished reading a book on the history of YouTube.
Right.
And uh and I know a lot about YouTube and I love doing YouTube. But it was interesting to learn the history. I went, right. Okay, cool. That puts this into a different context. So to be a student of the game is, I think, crucial,
Right.
right? And that was always my approach to this, being a student of the game so I could understand how the game works, irrespective of me, right?
Right.
Nothing is less interesting to me than my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is less interesting to me than I'm having my experience. Great, cool. What could it be? What is this thing? That's what's interesting to me.
I see. I see. So speaking on that more so, what type of challenges have you faced in your career in this industry?
There's all the time. You have the personal challenges and then you have the public challenges. The personal challenges are keeping your brain focused, um, and not being overwhelmed by situations. That's a personal challenge. For me, that part wasn't so much the issue because I'm pretty focused. But the challenges are the industry is always changing. Things are always going to be different. You get hired and then you get fired publicly, and so everybody sees. And but that, weirdly enough, is actually pretty dope
Mm-hmm.
because you have to have a certain level of fire to be able to navigate the wins and the losses and kind of be like this, even keel,
Right.
which is sort of what I am. I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty even keel about
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
But building the next things. One of the challenges that hit me a few years ago, after I got fired from Hockey Night in Canada, I was, not that long after I sold a show to Apple,
Mm-hmm.
and which was really great, really fun. And then Apple brought me out down to LA to do the show for them. So that's been great. And I love it. But one of the real challenges is retraining your brain to see the next opportunity. And it's very hard for people as they get older. I'm in my 50s, right? When
Mm-hmm.
people get older, it's real, especially media cats, because everybody actually in any walk of life, but media cats are maybe they're the only ones I really talk to about it this way. But you have there's this mistake that people always make where they say, "Oh, YouTube is for the kids," or "This is for that," or "This is for that," and I don't think so. But to figure out how to do it when you have done it one way for decades is very hard. Very, very hard. And so I find the great challenge, and maybe it's not a challenge for me anymore, but maybe it was a couple of years ago, was figuring out, can I even figure this out?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because I'm not delusional, but so I'm very realistic. But also, I think you have to have an element of who cares, try anyway. And
Exactly.
I think the hardest thing to do as you get older is managing your brain and managing
Sure.
your
Yeah.
expectations and managing your confidence and managing not your confidence sometimes in yourself, but sometimes your confidence in that everything will be okay, that
Right.
this matters. That's the hardest part as you get old. When you're young, the hard part is keeping your shit together, right? Especially if you get any success, because you like Danny, you're going to be older a lot longer than you're young, hopefully, right? And you don't want to miss the opportunity of being young. But what seeds are you planting for when you're older? In
Exactly.
this, not just in life, but in this business,
For
right?
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the stuff it's really hard to manage, especially, dudes as you get older, men start to deal with all kinds of things that, in my era, we're never allowed to talk about. Being sad, being depressed, being anxious, being all these things. And you're in a business where you're getting pummeled every day by strangers. So,
For
and you're
sure.
getting and you're getting loved by strangers. Very few businesses have that. Lots of like life is hard for everybody. I get that. But
Hmm.
very few businesses have it where you walk down the street and people are yelling at you. That's our business.
For
And
sure.
very few businesses have where in your DMs, you are getting devastated by people on the daily. And so
Hmm.
the real world, people who don't do media for a living, they don't give a shit about that. They go, oh, boo
Exactly.
hoo hoo, whatever, whatever. But I guarantee you that most people would be changed if this was their experience,
Right.
right?
Right.
So when you get older, I mean, you're managing a lot of shit with your brain, right, all the time.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so to me, that's the industry challenges. To be honest with you, aren't as compelling to me
Right.
because I actually quite love I was saying this to my team the other day. Because we just launched this new kind of live YouTube thing, just really small, really fun. I do interviews still and I do the Apple show, but I want to do something small and punk rock. So we started
Mhm.
doing this little thing, and the what I said to them, what the best part about it is, if it works or doesn't work, it'll be based on our standards and based on our ability. There are no gatekeepers.
For sure.
It's on you. And I love deep personal accountability. I've said that lots of times in my life. I love it. Figuring stuff out is dope when you get figured out. Also, managing your ego, managing wins and losses is so interesting to me because
Hmm.
I'm here for a human experience. And I know that there's a certain group of people who would have grown up watching me that are on the same journey as I am emotionally or intellectually or physically or whatever. And so I just get to be somebody who keeps them company at night and talks about these things in a very upfront, authentic way because that's who I am. And I just love that I can do it on my terms.
Hmm.
That's the best. But most people in our business, that's the great challenge is when it changes, how do you find another gear? That to me is the most amazing thing about this.
For sure. I completely agree with you. Second last question, George. So you say you're I wanted to know what do you do in your career now, but you say that you're in Apple Music. Speak on that experience for me.
Yeah, we do this music show. We air in 165 countries around the world. I interview people and play songs, and it's kind of a throwback to my days at the Edge. And I really love it. I love it. There's an element of like I feel very, very lucky that in my whole career, Danny, there was only one time where I felt like I wasn't at a place long enough. Hockey lasted more than enough. 2 years was more than enough, right? The talk show was 10 years. CBC radio was a bunch of years. But I worked at the Edge for about 2.5 years, less than 3 years. That radio station I grew up listening to, I got to be on the air and be an interviewer there. That was really fun.
Hmm.
Um, but I always felt like I wish that job had lasted a couple of years more, a couple of years longer.
Right.
But what happened was I got hired at Much Music right from there.
Hmm.
So obviously that Much was an amazing experience too, and I'm grateful for that. But there's a part of me that looks at this and says, "Yeah, that would have been cool." So when I was getting ready to do another interview show with another company, Apple offered me this show, and I remembered, oh right, this is the thing that I missed doing. Let me go do this.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's really, I go to work, I go to the studio, I put my headphones on, press play. I know we're all around the world, and it's like, let's do this. I love that. So that's what I do. My show's on the air 4 days a week now. We've done it for 4 years. So well, I think we've evolved our show multiple times. It's another thing I love about working with Apple Music is that we can always change stuff. We do 5 days a week. We do 4 days a week. We'll do one day a week. We'll do five. I love that it's just putting episodes out there for you to listen to whenever you want.
Hmm.
And there's lots of different ways to do that. I think we're approaching. I haven't missed a show since I started, since we launched.
That's
Haven't
great.
taken haven't taken a single episode off.
That's
Even
great.
if I've traveled, I haven't taken one vacation day. It's always been making sure we have shows. But here's the thing: we're approaching. If you count our daily live show and our specials we've done, we're somewhere around 900 episodes already of that show.
Wow.
And I just love to be that I'm at this age. I could launch a new show and get close to 1,000 episodes of it. That to me makes
Sure.
me happy, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know how many episodes I did of. Well, let me see. If I did live in Toronto, I probably did. But I did 5 days a week for a year and a half on that show. However that is. So I've made I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of tens of thousands of hours of stuff. And I love it. So
Right.
Apple's been just a really great experience. You know, I get to do the show from Los Angeles, from Toronto, from New York, from London. To do a show from London has always been a dream of mine. I got to do it. So I'm just very grateful to be able to do all this stuff.
That's amazing, George. That's amazing. 900. Hopefully I get to that mark with
Oh,
my own.
you will. You will. By the
I
way,
wanted to know any advice you want to give to any aspiring journalists or broadcasters like myself who aim to make a meaningful impact in this industry like yourself.
depends what you want to do. In
Right.
that, it depends what your reason for being is. And if your reason for being is you just want to talk for a living,
Hmm.
cool.
Right.
Figure out what it is you want and then double down on it,
For
right?
sure. For sure.
But, not but, to add to that, whatever your reason for being is, you have to pay very close attention to who's watching you and listening and what is their reason for being.
Hmm.
Are they watching you to watch you yell on the screen and have a car crash? Are they watching you to be entertained? Are they watching you to learn? Like, what kind of relationship do you want with the people? Because listen, broadcasting from our homes, you know, I was doing my Apple show from my home during COVID, 165 countries around the world from a spare bedroom, right?
Right.
But so but what you're doing is you're just in your home
Right.
and you think you're just talking, but who's listening to you and why? Who's watching you and why? Figure that out. That connection, that reason for being, and then never ever betray your audience. I don't even ever call them an audience for me. They're not an audience. They're a person that's listening to me today. Never betray that relationship with them. Make a contract with them in your mind and keep it.
Hmm.
This is the thing that most young no, and not I mean most broadcasters throughout their career don't do this, but when you're starting, what is the foundation that you're building this house on, right? And do the work to learn that. Learn the human brain, learn the human condition, learn philosophy, learn these kind because over the more you read about who we are as people and the history of us, one, the more you're going to know, but also what it's going to make you is more interesting, more interested. It's going to
Hmm.
make you more confident. It's going to make you a better communicator. It's going to make you better at understanding people. It's going to make you a better conversationalist, a better interviewer. So you're going to get all the technical things done and
Right.
all those technical. But because you're doing your show, right, Danny, you can turn the mic on whenever you want. You could go live every single day. You could go on
Exactly.
tape every single day. You
For
could do
sure.
it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you could take the things you learn and you could go with that. That kind of thing is fantastic. So the practice you're going to get it anyway because no one's stopping you. There's no one saying no, Danny, you can't come in the studio today. You are the studio. But what are you about? What are you going to talk about? Who are you really?
Right.
That's the stuff you kind of got to work on. You know, that's the kind of stuff you got to sort of. Everybody does. That's my advice is, and most people in school. I mean, look, I haven't been in school in a long time, but I'll speak at school sometimes. And most people who get a lick of fame or a lick of profile or feedback from strangers, they kind of they kind of unravel a little bit because their core isn't defined for themselves. Now, it doesn't mean that what you define has to stay exactly that way the whole time, but your core values better be solid and you have to feed them and nourish them to make sure that they are. Lots of stuff around you can change. People like I was interviewed by somebody for Ben Mulrooney interviewed me and he said on his show
Hmm.
that you recently that my career makes no sense. And based on all my choices and how I went in the show, and like there's no path, right? I'm doing all this kind of stuff. Even the audience will look at me sometimes and go, "Oh, you used to host Hockey Night in Canada. You had your own talk show. Now you're on Apple. You got fired. You know, you're over." People say that to you, right? But if you think about it,
Hmm.
my career makes perfect sense because my core is the same. I'm just
Right.
building spokes out of this, and I love. I'm so grateful for the career that I've had, but the work has to go into what is your center, and so my big advice to anybody is really understand what it is you want, who you are, why you want to do this, what you want your relationship with the audience to be, and what you want those people watching you, that individual watching you, what you want them to feel about you, the time they're giving you. That's
Exactly.
and bro,
Yeah.
most people won't do that because that shit takes thinking. And that take that takes emotional quote. Everybody's talking about your IQ. I don't care about your IQ. I care about your EQ, right? What's
Right.
your emotional situation? And that, I mean, that has been my whole approach for 32 years, and I'm still going. And I know that when I move on to the next thing, which is probably going to be fully independent, I know that I know exactly what I want to do. You
Exactly.
know, I don't know what that'll be. I don't know when that'll be, but I love the idea of make this, sell this, make this, do this, but your core stays the same. And
Right.
most people, bro, won't do it. Most
For
people will
sure.
say, totally, I get it, but they won't do it.
Hmm.
And then, but the doing that part has been crucial.
Exactly. Well, George, that was amazing advice, man. Thank you for coming on my show. It was a true honor and privilege. George Stroumboulopoulos, everyone. You can follow him on his social handles. I'll put all his social handles in the links and his links in the description down below for y'all to go and follow and connect with him. George, thank you for doing this, man. This means a
Hey,
lot
man,
to me.
a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Have a nice day.
Thanks.